Hi, all. This is Mrs. Gable. I'm here doing Chapter 10, Section 4, The Effect of the War on African Americans. So the first sentence starts off with, although the war started as a conflict over states' rights and a fight to preserve the Union, it became a struggle over the future of slavery. I will admit I do not agree with this first statement, that it was a conflict over states' rights. In the past couple of years, there had been issues where states were upset with the federal government, saying the federal government had overstepped its bounds and it was getting in the states' government's way. However, those didn't result in war, even though the states still didn't have those rights, whatever it was about. And ultimately, when those southern states did secede, in their secession letter, they talk about slavery over 50 times. So, as Frederick Douglass says in this quote, what he's basically saying is you can say it's about states' rights, you can say it's about preserving the Union, you can disguise it however you want. But it's virtually nothing more or less than slavery. It's all revolving around slavery. That's what it keeps coming back to, the common denominator. So as we continue reading, the Emancipation Proclamation doesn't actually technically liberate any slaves, but many African Americans see that as the first step towards gaining equal rights. Now, with African Americans in the war effort, we're going to see that it's going to take a lot more than just the Emancipation Proclamation to actually gain equal rights. People were wanting to have all Black regiments in the war, in the Union, since the war began. However, Lincoln had kind of avoided that. He was afraid that Black troops might have an effect on the border states. Reminder, those border states are Missouri, Maryland, Delaware, and Kentucky. And they're all still technically part of the Union. However, they're kind of one bad move away from joining the Confederacy. So Lincoln didn't want to tick them off and have them go and support the Confederacy. Not only that, but people were prejudiced against African Americans. Many Northerners doubted that African Americans could make valuable soldiers. So there's definitely a bias and a prejudice against African Americans within the North as well. However, as the war continues on, African American recruitment into the war was approved in 1862. The most famous Black unit was the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. All right. On July 18th, 1863, the 54th stormed the Confederate defenses at Fort Wagner, South Carolina. The assault failed, killing more than 40% of the regiment. That's a very large percentage. But the troops fought valiantly, bravely, and earned the praise of a nation. The 54th Massachusetts Regiment basically proved that those African American soldiers could do and are doing the same thing as white soldiers. One white officer talked about how his prejudices against Black troops have been dispelled. They're gone because they behaved magnificently and fought splendidly. They are far superior in discipline to white troops and just as brave. So finally, people are starting to understand that African Americans are not any different than whites. Okay. However, that doesn't mean there's not racism and discrimination. There's definitely still a lot of that. And unfortunately, it's going to continue past the Civil War. It talks about how Black soldiers were assigned menial tasks, meaning like low, like digging ditches. They were given poor weapons. They didn't receive the same type of training that white soldiers did, which means there was a higher amount of deaths and injuries among African American troops. There was more risk. Black soldiers that were captured in the South, where a majority of the war is happening, they risked being enslaved or executed rather than just being a prisoner of war like a white soldier would be. And ultimately, they weren't paid the same. White soldiers earned $13 a month, while African Americans were paid just $10. They handled different groups handled that differently. There were some Black regiments that just said, hey, if you're not going to pay us what you owe us, I don't want your money. Okay? We're not accepting any pay. Others decided that we're not going to work. You're not giving us fair wages. We're not going to work. Unfortunately, that did not work, as that leader, William Walker, was charged with mutiny and actually was executed by firing squad. It wasn't until June 1864 that Congress agreed to equalize pay for both white and Black soldiers, including back pay, which means, hey, if you joined in 62, that means you'll have gotten those extra $3 a month that you were owed. However, while this is a great sentiment, it doesn't always work out, because what if that person had died? A lot of these soldiers are just sending the money back home, so that means those families never got that money either. Right? So even though things are improving for African Americans, there is definitely still a lot of work to do in terms of trying to equalize, gain equal rights.